political news, but also talking about the brand strategy of Kamala Harris, because we are going to focus this first interview hour on Kamala Harris. Next hour, we'll focus a little bit on Donald Trump and the brand strategy behind that one as well. So let's bring in our next guest of this hour to help break it all down for us. We got brand strategist Ian Bear with us. Ian, thanks so much for joining us on Live Now. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be here.
Yeah, so it's we're at a moment here in history as we get closer to November. We're seeing two different really campaign styles for Kamala Harris and her team. We're seeing a more digital focused approach, more for the younger crowd as well, especially when you hit on the sites like X and TikTok. But maybe explain to it what you are seeing from your point of view with her campaign.
Well, it's been really interesting to watch look, we're all watching this as citizens, but as a marketer and as somebody who, helps brands for a living, it was fascinating to watch the very quick unfolding from the point that President Biden dropped out of the race and when it very quickly shifted to become a Kamala campaign. It seemed as if they understood where they may have had some disenfranchised Gen Z voters, especially people who weren't necessarily going to go to the polls for Biden. We saw Gen Z come to the polls in really impressive numbers, both in 2020 and in 2022. They seem to realize very quickly getting those folks to the polls now was going to be mission critical. The Kamala HQ TikTok channel is incredibly impressive. They also had a bit of surreptitious luck with, Kamala is brat. Interestingly enough, by the way, that went out on Twitter, not TikTok to begin with. And then the way they seem to lean into Gen Z, that's really worth watching. This is not a generation that wants to be told what's important, what to think, what to do. They like to see what's already important to them embraced. So if you look, for example, at the camo hat that became available online the day Tim Walz was announced as the running mate, and that being a copycat of Chappell Roan's Midwest Princess hat, that showed an understanding, something that had already become a meme, was something they embraced and leaned into. And I think that the key so far, and what's been really impressive, is their ability to adapt to the cultural trends of Gen Z and lean into what's already happening, as opposed to the more typical approach to political marketing, where you try to create a movement.
And I also want to get your take while they are focusing in on those efforts of Gen Z. Is there sometimes maybe room for, okay, we might be going too much for them and we might start alienating more of the, 30 to 50-year-old range? I mean, how does that play in a role as well?
This all bears watching. Certainly, they seem to have captivated something far beyond the younger voters. But the reality is you're not going to get every voting cohort the same way. So you have to make the most of every channel. But so much, if you look at cultural trends in this country, I'm not even talking about politics. I could be talking about fashion. I could be talking about entertainment. A lot of them originate in the youth community, in the LGBTQ community, going back to the Midwest Princess angle with Walz and Chappell Roan being an icon in that community. Coming out of not necessarily the mainstream, but more those cutting edge audiences, and older audiences and more established audiences tend to pick up trends from there. So you've got people now wearing that Chappell Roan themed cap who may be, a 45-year-old mom shopping in the supermarket. So it's not just focusing there, but it's understanding where those trends are relevant. Now, there's going to be a much more politically oriented audience, an audience that wants to hear about the issues. And as the campaign starts to ramp up its more policy oriented messaging, I think about the DNC happening next week, and everything that's going to come out of that convention, where now it's going to become more serious. That's not necessarily a TikTok conversation. They're going to have to be just as powerful in channels like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. And that's really where I think the more politically interested audiences are going to be looking for that same level of satisfaction. They've been brilliant with the youth market so far. It's given them a halo effect across other cohorts. We have a lot of race ahead of us.
Yeah, we really, really do. And Ian, last one here for you. I'm fascinated with let's go back to June. Before the debate, Kamala Harris was focused with Joe Biden to be on the second chair of that ticket. Had no idea that what was going to happen from the debate. And then really everything the next 30 days after that was
Right.
truly fascinating and so historic. But I have to ask you here, how does her team, as well as other advisors, go from, focused in on trying to get their reelection for Biden, then to all of a sudden we got to remap, retool everything, and we got to push Kamala now to the finish line for that?
Well, nobody really knows what conversations were going on, behind certain closed doors, but they adapted very quickly. I think it was a stroke of brilliance, or maybe just practical necessity, to immediately shift all of the Biden campaign resources that were already up and running, and for that to become the Harris campaign team. Had it been any other candidate, they wouldn't have had that opportunity. But at the same time, it was becoming clear around certain issues. Uh, the issue of abortion and a woman's right to choose, for example, where it was clear that Kamala Harris was going to play an important role as a spokesperson for the campaign. So you have to think they were already begin to developing messaging strategies, especially coming out of the convention, things we would have seen in the weeks ahead. Still, it was a dramatic and very impressive shift. When I think about all the work I've done with brands over the decades, and I've seen brands have to very quickly pivot a strategy from one to another, or I think of a brand I worked on where their celebrity spokesperson got involved in a rather unfortunate scandal and they had to change spokespeople overnight. And
Mm.
I can tell you, it is not easy to pull it off with the grace and the aplomb that they did. It's very, very impressive. Now, the other thing they did was very quickly added a lot more staff. And this staff has shown a real understanding of messaging, generational messaging. It's a completely different tone. I mean, the Biden campaign was very issues oriented, pointing to the track record, and they developed this sense of cultural knowledge, this snarky sense of humor right away. That signaled a very different campaign. And I think that's something that's worked effectively for them to welcome more people into the fold who maybe didn't know which way to go.
Yeah, that is so true. And yeah, and it's fascinating to watch there. And we're still in the summer months as we get into the fall. I know things will continue to ramp up there for really both sides. But Ian, thanks so much for speaking with us and giving us some great insight. We appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate this. Thanks so much. And yeah, get your popcorn, everyone. It's going to be a heck of a summer.
Yeah, and buckle up too, right?
Uh huh.
Take care, Ian. Bye bye.